The government and the industry are trying to accelerate EV adoption by reducing cost of acquisition, creating a network of charging infrastructure, improving the distance which can be covered between recharges, and strengthening the overall electric mobility ecosystem. In the upcoming panel discussion, we'll get to know the perspective of a panel of guests on the electric cars, the way forward. I would like to invite Mr. Sumant Banerjee, Consulting Editor, ET Auto, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Sumant.
Hello and welcome to ET Auto EV Conclave 2022. India is at the cusp of an e-mobility revolution. It is a transition that is much needed, with the potential to reduce oil imports, address air pollution in cities, and help meet India's climate commitments by reducing the energy intensity of GDP. In addition, this transition can spur the growth of new industries and activities. But it is not going to be a cakewalk. For the passenger vehicle segment that is at the heart of India's automotive industry, challenges like high cost, low levels of localization, and range anxiety would need to be overcome. Thankfully, these are not insurmountable. Kickstarting this year's EV Conclave, and to discuss more on this, about what and how the future would look like, we have put a stellar panel for the discussion. It is an honor to welcome Mr. Sailesh Chandra, Managing Director at Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles, and he's also the head of Tata Motors Electric Mobility Unit, and Mr. Martin Schwenk, the Managing Director and CEO of Mercedes-Benz India. These two will be representing the OEM side of business. And we also have Mr. Gurprasad Mudlapur, Joint Managing Director, Bosch Limited, and the Chief Technological Officer of Bosch India, along with Mr. Suresh Kevi, President of ZF India. Both of these gentlemen will be representing the component side of business. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here at ET Auto, and it's a pleasure always to have you. To set the ball rolling, Sailesh, I will come to you. You are the market leader as far as passenger vehicles, electric mobility is concerned. You were very early into the game. Give us a sense of where India stands on the passenger vehicle side as far as e-mobility is concerned, and how do you think this is going to accelerate in the near time?
Thank you, Sumant, for making this part of this panel discussion. If you really see, Sumant, the journey in the last 3-4 years, the car industry demand has been accelerating. And the numbers, even what we see today, is more constrained by supplies and less of demand. And I was just looking at the data. If you see a comparison 3 years back, and if you compare that with where we are going to end this financial year as far as sales of electric cars are concerned, this would be nearly a 10 times jump, right? From a 2,000 kind of a level a year to 20,000, hopefully this year. And in just 1 year, if you see, as compared to what it was in FY 2021, this will be still a 3.5 times growth. So it is, of course, accelerating at a very fast pace. And as I said, that demand would be much stronger than what you're seeing. And all these numbers are based on supplies. Now, what are the factors which are really driving this growth, right? One, if you remember, before 2020, there were lack of private electric cars. Whatever cars were available, they were meant for fleet segment, which is a very small part of the overall Indian car industry. And when Nexon EV got launched, and I'm naming a product because that was the one which is the significant part of the sales these days. It brought the right balance of some of the barriers got addressed with the right balance of price range and the performance and features that you needed. And the availability of 2-3 choices has just led to this kind of accelerated growth that we have seen in the past few years. Also, very important that the early adopters of these electric cars, are very expressive. They don't mind speaking about their experiences, and they have been expressing their experiences in the social media, and that positive word of mouth has given confidence to a lot of fence sitters of customers who are looking for electric cars. So this is creating the necessary pull. But on the other side, I must compliment the efforts of the government, which is putting a great thrust, not only the central government, but also various state governments, with 16 states now on the verge of announcing and implementing progressive EV policies. And just as an example, Maharashtra and Gujarat, these two states, because of the benefits that they have given to the consumers in their states, has led to a huge surge in demand, which is not served as yet. But I'm saying that these efforts have also led to a significant part of this demand you see because of government effort also. So that's been the growth as of now. Going forward, what is really left in terms of addressing the barriers and which will help further grow from where we are today is the charging infra bit. And when I say charging infra, I'm not only meaning the public charging infrastructure, but more home charging solutions, RWA level charging solution where people without a dedicated parking can also charge their cars. These are the areas where we have to really overcome the challenges of putting chargers on the highways. If these issues are addressed, one would question why you would buy a conventional car. This car is automatic, silent, higher on performance, lower on operating cost, lower on maintenance cost, higher warranty. I mean, you have everything. And once these issues are addressed, more choices are made available to the customers in different price point, different body styles. This will fly.
Right. It is very peculiar in a way that in the ICE vehicle segment, we are facing some issues with as far as demand is concerned. Of course, there are supply side constraints as well. I'm not talking about Tata Motors though, but generally there is a sort of a resistance to buying vehicles of any kind. Whereas when it comes to EVs, though the numbers are small, there seems to be a intense struggle to supply the demand that you are getting. Martin, I would like to bring you in here. You were one of the first to launch electric vehicles in the luxury segment. Now, generally, one would tend to believe that because affordability is not that big a concern, luxury segment is a low-hanging fruit for electrification as far as passenger vehicles is concerned. But give us your sense of what has been your experience and how Mercedes intends to accelerate the process of electrification in the luxury space in India.
Well, let me make first quickly a statement on, you say, weakening demand on the ICE vehicles. I honestly cannot see that in our portfolio at all. We have very strong demand and big growth rates, and that's on significantly higher numbers, obviously, as a base compared to electric vehicles. But of course, the transformation has started, and we will definitely see a further conversion and transition to electric vehicles. Shailesh was talking a lot of these different impacts, and I see that very alike from government policies to, say, a wider variety of vehicles being in the market, which are really enticing to customers. And top of that, we have seen a change in public awareness of that. 3 years ago, automotive press would have almost thought there is no such thing as an electric car. Now it's all over all the time. People are much more conscious about sustainability and green energy. So everything is set, the stage is set for a future in electric vehicles. If I look into Mercedes-Benz as a brand, yes, we have brought early an electric vehicle with the EQC in the luxury segment, basically to implement, on the one hand, to have a first approach to the market to see how it's received, how it's being received, at the same time to develop the capabilities in the network in our own areas as well. And now we have early in the year announced that we make the next, I think, significant step by producing locally the EQS model, which is like the top end vehicle, like the S-class of EVs, so to say, which we are bringing here to India in the fourth quarter, and we have decided to do that in domestic production. What you see here is now, this time we see with this vehicle, we see a much broader possibility to have higher numbers there. It is, of course, still a luxury, I would say a top luxury product, but it will be able to reach a broader audience also by the vehicle characteristics as such. So we really believe there is a chance on continuous growth in that segment, actually in accelerated growth. And we want to do the next step here with the EQS. You talk about pricing and cost positioning. Of course, it is, in my view, very much appreciated that we have the beneficial situation when it comes to the GST and CEST regimes and road tax, because that helps us to get into price points which are to some level comparable with what you would see with an ICE vehicle then, and that will certainly then also help the adoption going forward. So I think our plan is clear. We want to benefit of the global portfolio that Mercedes-Benz is setting up at the moment and implement any product we see which has a good traction, which should get a good traction here in India, not only to sell it here locally, but also to consider domestic production then.
Right. Martin, we talk about electric mobility in the backdrop of this intense war we are fighting against climate change, where there is no doubt about it that all hands need to be on the deck, and transport also plays a big role. We are talking about how we can make power generation greener. We are also talking about other segments, be it steel or any other industry, where everybody is talking about reducing carbon emissions. So transport definitely has a role to play. How do you think we can really accelerate? Because we are still talking about maybe by 2030, we will reach 30% of penetration for electric mobility for passenger vehicles in India. But there is a feeling that that may not be enough in the bigger context of this war against climate change. Can you put that context in, that what we need to achieve and where we are right now and where we intend to go?
I think as in any of these changes, on the one hand, you have, say, public opinion and consumer demand. On the other hand, it's a massive role or a significant role the government policies play in that field. And I think for even faster adoption of electric vehicles, I think the first and foremost, we need a clear agenda and a clear roadmap also for the next coming years and to what is going to happen. So there's a lot of announcements that we have seen which go into all areas when it comes to the budget discussion that was just recently. What I think would help us to have a more visibility in a maybe even long-term plan, how to develop the electric mobility in a more holistic approach over the entire, say, decade, and that would give us visibility and allow also for manufacturers and suppliers to dedicate resources accordingly. This long-term strategy could also go far beyond when we talk, for example, battery swapping. It could be into building codes. It could be into what is really taxation on duty structures going forward. It could be into infrastructure measures going forward. So I'm not having a fully comprehensive approach here, but I think what helps always for the industry also to develop is, of course, a clear path and stability going forward. When it comes to green energy, there is multiple initiatives that can be taken, and I would assume all of the colleagues here on the panel also try not only on their products but also on their production sites to get as green as possible. And I think there's a lot of movement from the industries and I think this will continue. So I don't want to push now the ball completely into a government area. I think we all have a job to do there, and we have definitely started doing that. I would say almost every inch or square foot of our area in our Chakan plant, for example, which can carry a solar panel, is doing that by now. So there's a lot of things we can do also in terms of creating the framework, and of course that includes then the energy and oil industries as well, that they consider what they can do to support the transition and become greener, which would not exactly be my field to give them advice to.
What's interesting that any discussion on electric mobility does throw up that word of transition, And some people get scared by it. Some people see it an opportunity, which gives me the cue to bring in both Suresh and Guruprasad. You are on the supplier side. You're making components which go into all the vehicles, and any path-breaking innovation starts with you. Now, when we are in this battle together, how challenging do you find this transition, and how are you approaching this once in a lifetime kind of change that we are witnessing?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Banerjee. I think it's been a honor to be part of this panel, and also I think the most interesting discussion in this decade is on the electrical vehicles. So, thank you for giving us the opportunity here. Yes, it's a challenge in front of us, but it's a challenge which we all would like to take up, because it's for a greener tomorrow. So I think it's an opportunity for all of us to do our bit towards the sustainability part. Yeah, the challenge is mainly you see the transition. If you look at it from a supplier perspective, we need to accept the fact that the entire demography, or even the parts are changing from what it is today to what it will be tomorrow. If you really look at it, the electronics and the semiconductors will become the major players. In our organization, we even say that the semiconductor will be the new gear, and our mantra is see, think, connect. So the cameras, the lidars, the actuators, which are the thinkers, and the doers would be the motors, and those will be the ones which we need to produce. If you really look at it, this transformation from the traditional gear manufacturing to getting into more and more intelligent parts to be manufactured will be the biggest change which we have to adopt, and the biggest challenge in front of us. What we are already experiencing that. I'm not saying that it's completely new, but what I would like to again start from what the government has done differently this time. If you look at the PLI scheme, they have not just done it for the OEs alone. I think it's been an intelligent move to give support to the component industry as well, because that gives an image that the component industry also has to actively contribute to this transformation. So from a component industry perspective, there is a complete change in the canvas on which we are playing, and that is exactly what we need to adapt to. I'm not saying that the mechanical engineers or the mechanical designs will cease to exist. It is going to be a slower ramp down from that perspective, but the speed at which the EVs are catching up will be the one which we have to adopt and adapt to. So I think what is important for us is more and more electronics in the manufacturing arena, more and more electronics and the artificial intelligence, all those things put together under Industry 4.0. Everything will play a part and will have to transform itself from moving from mechanical engineering to an advanced electronics engineering, which will become the base for manufacturing in future.
Right. Guruprasad, if you can add to that and also give us a sense, because we tend to hear that the speed of the transformation is probably faster than what anybody would have envisioned a decade ago. Everybody knew electric mobility is coming, but maybe now that you see the demand, and as both Sailesh and Martin also mentioned, it looks like the consumers, at least some set of the consumers, are actually more ready than what we could have imagined for 2022, say back in 2015. Is this speed scary for you?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Firstly, thanks, Sumant, for having me on the panel. It's scary in some aspects, but also very encouraging and challenging in other aspects. I would put the overall timeline into two parts, one between now and sort of 2025, and a time frame beyond that 2025, where we believe there will be a lot more steady state in terms of how we look at EVs compared to where we are today. So what's happening in terms of challenges from now till let's say 2025 is that we are going through an extreme phase of conversions. What do I mean with that? It's basically a lot of OEMs going into ICE convertibles. So they have an ICE platform and they want to have a quick EV coming in. The E architectures are changing as we speak on a very rapid base. So the evolution of the E architectures will sort of reach a steady state maybe beyond 2025, but right now the kind of convergence that's happening is very, very different. Because of the scale we have or don't have right now till sort of 25, the manufacturing costs, the amount of capex that can come in, the way we amortize costs, this is also going to be very, very different and needs to be handled differently. On top of that is a very, very severe shortage of competencies and people to execute projects. So maybe as Bosch, we have one of the largest engineering capabilities in India today as a tier one. But we still find it extremely difficult to get quality engineers who can work on power electronics or on motors and cutting edge technology. So that's a big challenge as well. There is also a picture today which is slowly emerging, but it's not yet very clear whether there will be higher levels of aggregation of building blocks and building blocks in terms of integration of multiple power electronics units into one, whether there will be an e-axle which combines multiple things or there will be a disaggregation. We see both trends, where we see trends towards disaggregation with some OEMs, trends towards aggregation with some OEMs, and this is something that is evolving as we speak. So we believe that the right time frame to evaluate how we stand with regard to challenges is probably 25 and beyond. But in the meanwhile, till 25, we do what is absolutely necessary to get the market going with the kind of solutions we have, with the platform approaches we have adopted at Bosch to make everything work for our OEMs. Of course, we are somehow, you said we are on one end of the spectrum. We are also stuck in between. We have our suppliers who are squeezing at one point, and we have OEMs on the other hand. So this is an equation which is always there for everybody. And that's a difficult one to solve as well, especially in the current situation where the demand outstrips supply in so many categories of material.
So if I am hearing you correctly, it looks like the next 3 years are going to be a period of chaos where you have so many things happening and you don't really know where the future is going to lie. So you're traveling with a lot of things, a lot of balls in the air. Let me come to you, Sailesh, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time because you have a very diverse portfolio. You have petrol, you have diesel, you also have CNG, and you have electric. Now, when it comes to going into the market, there are different teams at play. There's a team which is tasked with the job of selling as many petrol vehicles. There is a team which sells as many diesel vehicles, CNG. But the consumer is still one. And when he walks into the showroom, how do you decide which one to push and which one not to? Because if you are trying to sell a Nexon petrol, for example, and there is a case to be made that, yes, the Nexon electric is more expensive, but the operating cost is lower. So we might convert him into a Nexon electric. So one team loses a customer, the other team gains one. How do you arrive at a balance that, oh, don't feel bad, he's still in the fray, but again, his KRA are not being met. So this whole challenge as a leader, as a CEO, how do you address this?
See, from Tata Motors perspective, I can say that our effort and intent would be to accelerate electrification, right? And therefore, there is some degree of prioritization and some degree of bias, which will be towards electric, because that's the need, but we also understand the difficulty and practicality of not being able to overnight change consumer mindset, creation of ecosystem, creation of capacities, and therefore it's going to take time. And there is a demand for mobility, personal mobility, and it has to be served through different alternatives. So while the journey will be to accelerate EVs, we have to, alongside, come with more eco-friendly solutions on the conventional vehicle side. That's the broad approach. When it comes to a showroom dynamics, what you talked about, one good thing is that a customer already comes with a clear, crystal clear thinking of what he's looking for. And that conversation is more about then understanding his needs. And then if that need can be served through an alternate option, whether it is EV or whether it is a petrol, that is what you facilitate in the buying process at the showroom level. But from an organization like us, it would never be that you push a certain vehicle from our side. It should be a facilitation of what best suits a customer, and that would be the approach that we follow at the showroom. There are many cases where a person came to buy a petrol car and drove an electric car, and they just loved it and bought an electric. There are lesser cases where a person came to buy an electric car and ended up buying a conventional car. This is the dynamics that we are seeing. So electric car customer comes to buy an electric car is what we are seeing. And there are focus teams to address those kind of customers who come with a lot of knowledge. They are very discerning customers. And you have to really facilitate the buying process with a lot of knowledge around that. And there's a very special training that we give to people who are involved in the EVs. But there's no push, forcing a customer to buy what we want to sell. That's not the approach.
Okay, but there is like you said, there's a prioritization for EVs.
Prioritization on the supply side, Suman. Prioritization on the supply side.
Supply side.
So
and a positive bias, positive bias towards greener mobility, electric mobility.
Absolutely.
Martin, we have heard something very similar from your global headquarters, where a lot of talk about EVs, a lot of new models coming in. Do you also feel the same way? And there will be a time when ICE vehicles will hit their peak, and that might be very, very soon, when you will see that, okay, we have hit this many million units of ICE vehicles, but now you cannot go any beyond, because EVs will start to grow and EVs will start to replace the ICE demand. Now that will be probably a period of intense churn within any company which is dabbling in all these technologies. What is your take on that? And do you also suffer from this positive bias that Sailesh is talking about?
Yeah, I think what we see is globally we are offering now almost all or this year or coming around 10 different fully battery electric vehicles, and we see a strong adoption. I mean, the EQS, which was only launched in August and started to sell in the US and China only in December, so that already sold 15,000 cars, or actually more, I think 16,000 something cars last year. So it's really, really fast going there. And I think that will continue. But what I also think, if you ask me about peak, at the moment, we see a strong, it's more complementing the current purchase. Our model lineup is not necessarily a replacement. Also, the way how it is being designed, we can still see a significant growth in the ICE segment. And at the same time, we see complementary sales on the electric vehicles. I have also to say, in our segment, of course, a lot of our customers, they are owners of multiple vehicles, and there it is also for them, say one first step into electrification. I would think we will see later in the decade more the replacement strategy, also in the luxury segment, but at the moment it's more complementing. So when we go then into replacing, let me make a simple example. We last year launched in India the ICE S-Class, and we have coming the EQS, but the product characteristics are different. Yeah, whilst the S-Class is focusing on traditional values like luxury, comfort, and adds technology. It's the other way around. I would say it comes from a technology and adds luxury to the EQS. So you have two cars which are a little bit different, not only in how their drivetrain is, but also in what type of customers they will appeal to. So we will see a growth in with electric vehicles, and at some point, and I would think that can happen towards the within the second half of this decade, we actually see the replacement then being much stronger than the complementing approach. That's at least how I look at it, and what I think will come going forward as well.
So Sailesh mentioned that there are some examples of somebody who's walked into a showroom looking at a petrol car, ended up driving the electric, and then he opted for the electric. But very few examples of the reverse happening. Somebody who went in to buy an electric, maybe he got a test drive of a diesel or a petrol, and he decided, oh, I don't need electric, I'm happy with that. Is that something similar happening in your showrooms as well? Somebody walked in looking for a C-Class, he saw the EQC and said, let's give it a try, liked it, bought it. But on the contrary, somebody who was looking at a EQC and saying, no, I'm fine with the petrol. Is that happening?
I would think this is not the current pattern for in our brand, where I spoke about this complementary approach. So an EQC is very different in terms of vehicle and in terms of customer profile as well. So you look there for the customer is rather an early adopter for electric vehicles, and if you have these early adopters and who think they should be at the forefront of what's doable in technology and combining then technology with luxury, they will not swerve and go back to an ICE engine because they have a different intent in mind. So I can clearly see over time that we see the customer who thinks he wants an ICE engine and he sees the alternative then and then considers going electric. I can see that direction coming more and more over the years. But again, I think we're talking a few years for at least in the luxury segment till we will see that. At the moment, we see more customers who really decidedly have informed themselves about electric and they want to really understand how it would work for them. And then they will look into an electric vehicle as their option to add to their mobility.
Yeah, so I think the awareness level still needs to go a little higher up before the cannibalization, if I can call it that, steps in. As you mentioned, maybe second half of this decade. Guruprasad, what is the sense you are getting, because you are part of a big global supplier who has production facilities and operations all across the globe in so many countries. What is the sense you are getting? Where does India stand vis-a-vis other countries as far as supply side is concerned for electric mobility? And in India, we tend to talk a lot about becoming a hub for anything. We earlier wanted to become a hub for two-wheelers. We wanted a hub for tractors, for small cars. Now we want to become a hub for electric mobility. Do we have it in us? And are we going in the right path as far as becoming a hub for the global markets is concerned?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question for sure. So based at least on global cues that we are getting, it largely depends on the segments. So there are areas, for example, 2- and 3-wheelers, we certainly could become a hub for global EV manufacturing or global EV developments as well. And we have the base, we can make the TCOs work, we can make the cost points work. And that could be a trigger for us to have a base which is cutting edge and exportable all over the world. But on passenger cars, I think we still have to get our bearings right in many aspects, both as both as tier ones and as an industry as a whole. Look, our own internal projection shows 30% at best case of passenger car volumes getting electrified by 2030. Around that could be a few percentage here and there. And that, in our view, is a very good number to go after, simply because of the extent of investments that need to flow in to make all that happen. From multiple elements in the value chain. It's not just a tier one which does the investment. the whole value chain has to come in and invest. So if that has to happen, I think we need, and even with that, the numbers are not going to be very large compared to even what China does today, or Europe does in 2 years from now, or US does at some point of time. So on the volume equation, we may never be the one who is leading the game. But in terms of cost innovation, in terms of how we bring frugality into the picture, and how we optimize our design concepts to make things work, we could really play a very key role in terms of how we lead the game, and how that aspect of leading could also be taken all over the world. So maybe we become the leader of small car electrification as an example, and then take it all over the world. So that could be a thing. Commercial vehicles, I think we start to see a trend emerging towards hydrogen and fuel cell EV. Of course, there will be a category where battery electric vehicles will be there, but commercial vehicles could pivot more towards hydrogen and fuel cell EVs. That's we believe could also become a leveler. And there we have possibility of having very good scale, very good technology brought in, and that can also be taken all over the world. So it's certainly segment wise, we need to look at it, and there is no one answer in my view which fits everything.
Suresh, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I think I echo Guru Prasad's views there. But what I importantly see is that given the volumes of two-wheelers and three-wheelers in the Indian market, and that being the target population today for conversion, which actually makes sense as well, given that they are more confined within a city or within a specific geographical area, because of which things related to battery becomes not that big a problem. Where in a passenger car you may look at driving for 4 to 5 hours, and then there is a doubt, then there are issues related to battery recharging or battery replacement, etc. So that can get extended to even the light commercial vehicles, which are the what we call it as a B2B, or the last mile mobility, last mile delivery vehicles, which can become another sector where anyway the commercial vehicle organizations are looking at that. Putting all these volumes together, I think that will give us a reasonably good amount of numbers to create a business case wherein we will be able to bring down the cost. Because what will remain as a challenge, and this we have seen when mobiles entered into the Indian market way back in the 90s, is that how does the cost come down? And we saw that as the volume started going up, we did see the reduction in the cost of the instruments. And I think that's exactly the path which we'll go through when it comes to electrical vehicles. Initially, there will be some amount of high cost breathing troubles related to the learning curve. And over a period of time, as the volumes increase, we will be able to bring down the cost, because India is a value-based market, and it's known all over the world. So I strongly believe that on the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler, we should be able to see the volumes coming up. Extending that to the smaller, less than 7-ton vehicles around the world, I think India can become an export hub. On the medium and HCV, I think we will have some way to go to get into that space. But as in all those segments where volumes can grow at a good speed, I'm sure that India will become an export hub for these aspects as well. And given the frugal engineering mindset which we have, I'm sure that we will be able to come out with innovative ideas to match the TCO requirements of the customers.
Right. Sailesh, I would like to bring you in here. And it looks like in passenger vehicles, we have some catching up to do. In the global scale, when you compare it to China or even some of the other European markets, it looks like we are lagging behind. There could be taxation issues. There could be some more SOPs from the government. You've been asking for FAME 2 subsidies being extended to personal mobility for passenger vehicles for the longest time. Nothing has happened on that, but probably your demand is worth it, because anybody who is buying an electric mobility is doing a good service to the environment at large. So why should he not be rewarded in some way. What is your take? What is needed for us to not only catch up with the others, but also maybe supersede them? We have some strengths of frugal engineering, but that alone may not be enough. There may be some other puzzles that we need to, some other blocks in the puzzle that we need to fix in. What is your take on that?
Suman, therefore, what really happens is that the dominant logic says that it's going to take time because of all the issues that are there. And we also talk about government, giving more incentives and all. But today, frankly, Sumant, I'm not struggling for demand at all here. I'm struggling for supplies. I'm struggling to convince the global suppliers to invest locally towards localization so that we can pursue the path of phased manufacturing plan that has been laid down by the government. Frankly, the demand, intrinsic demand is very, very high, with just 1 or 2 products competing with 140 products in the ICE world. The thing that needs to be done, right? The ownership is more on the OEM side, on the vendors, right? And the supply partners, that we invest. And of course, there will be different strategic postures of different OEMs, different vendors, because there are global vendors who have come and invested, have believed that this is going to grow. So first, the first filter that you have to cross is whether you believe that this is a locked-in trend now, right? Now, then it's a matter of when the scale up will happen, right? That's the question, and the jury will be out whether it is 30%, 40%, 10%. I don't know, whatever it is. The challenge is more investment in capacities and investment into products, right? Charging infra and all is going to come. I always say that charging infra is an overstated problem. Today, we have about 15, 20,000 vehicles, Nexon EVs on the road. And the telematics data shows that 96, 97% of them are charging at home, very conveniently. And it is only when you go to the highways, and because the range has been kept on a lower side to make it affordable, right? And as the battery prices are coming down, as we are scaling up, as we are localizing, you'll be able to give higher range. So there is a progressive increase in range, which is going to happen. There is a progressive improvement in the charging infra, which is going to come, with now oil companies really focusing on charging infra also. That was the biggest bottleneck in my view, because that's the most practical place where charging infra can be put. I see clearly there are many enablers in place. Sumant, from government, I think government has done a lot. I don't see that government needs to do anything more. It is ownership on the rest of the ecosystem players that we invest, give options to the consumer. Consumer is there to take electric vehicles. We have to create capacities. We have to do localization, and progressively charging infrastructure will happen. And it's a matter of time, 2 to 3 years, where all these barriers will be overtaken. I see this as the I was listening, and you also asked this question about India and car. I mean, this is fifth largest market in the world, progressing towards becoming a 7 million market from a 3 million today by 2030. You have talent, global talent in software. This car is now going to be software on wheels. You have demand, you have talent, you have intention of the government. Why we should not make it happen in India? I mean, my question is that. And why we should always think that we are relegated always to the lower part of the value chain. I mean, I frankly feel that huge opportunity in this decade itself. And if we don't do the bit from each of the stakeholders, we'll not be able to really build from where we are. I'm very, very, very optimistic about passenger vehicle electric mobility, and things will happen. And I think 3 years back, the conversation for me used to be very difficult. Really, people used to feel stupid that it's not the way to go. But once you start working on it, and I said earlier also that when a customer drives an electric car and experiences it, you really struggle to find an answer why a conventional car should be bought. We have to only take care of some of the barriers.
Martin, what is your thinking? Do you think, I know that at Mercedes, you have localized many more products than any other luxury car maker You also have a portfolio that in fact dwarfs some of the other mass market manufacturers in terms of the number of offerings that you have. But do you think India has it in it to become a hub for some of the luxury cars, for example, in the electric mobility space? Because we are resetting the game here. Some country may have a head start when it compares to the traditional technologies. But when it comes to electric mobility, we are all more or less at the starting line. Maybe somebody is 1 point ahead, but not by a huge margin. So we can catch up soon if we want to. And making a luxury car also has a lot of good impact on the ecosystem, because you are making a very high-end, high-quality car. And that is really a good boost to have for the local manufacturing. Do you think India has it to become a hub for even luxury cars for electric mobility?
Well, I think I will not exclude it, but I think our starting position is a little bit more difficult than what you just mentioned. I mean, to be a hub for export, you have to have a strong domestic consumption of vehicles. And I think what in the premium and luxury segment has not happened over the last years or even decades is significant growth, which would support substantial, say, domestic consumption of premium and luxury vehicles. So the framework was not there. You were mentioning, we were talking about taxation and structures around that. At the end, we have how would I say, far too low level of penetration of luxury cars in the market itself. There is several reasons for that. It's consumer behavior, but it's also overall policy making around that. And this has disadvantaged us also in the start into new technologies, because again, investment will first happen, and I think Guru Prasad said something similar, will first happen in markets where you have the strong footprint already in the market itself, also on sales potential. So why would someone invest in India? For what reasons to export cars in the premium luxury segment if the market is not in India, if the market is somewhere else? There is always a close relationship between, say, a domestic, in any region of the world, a domestic production and a domestic consumption. And I think we have a little late start there. So the question now is it possible to pivot here and then have a stronger emphasis on production and sales than here in India? Because again, I see that jointly. That brings me back to the framework. One of the main deterrents in the past was the high taxation structure. If we consistently are able to keep on electric vehicles or similar to today's levels taxation into place, then there is a significant, I would say, huge incentive for producing and selling here domestically electric vehicles, also in the premium, say in the above 4 meter segment, so to say. If that is remaining, then one of the core disadvantages of the past compared to other markets is being eliminated. And that would, even with a later start, enable us to look into a stronger future than at that end as well. But I don't want to fail also to talk about a framework outside that. We have to have the right trade agreements in place for this. And it must be understood that international trade is not a one-way street. It goes always both directions. So we cannot be an export hub without allowing import to some level. And that is something which needs to be a thorough policy here. So while Sailesh is very bullish on the approach in his segment, I understand, and I would subscribe a couple of topics you mentioned. For example, the infrastructure topic is not the core definer. We'll get longer range and all of that. But I see the hurdles of a late start and a very small minuscule sales volume, which we're actually having here as a major disadvantage for an expansion here, first domestically, then also in a global setup. So in theory, the potential is there. In reality, I think it will be not easy to leverage it.
Right, you made so many points.
I would just like to add one data point, which
Yes,
will be, very interesting for the audience, is that I sell Nexon EVs more than diesel. right, today. And that's why I'm trying to build the point that if more options are in the market. See, I am in the models where I have electrified, my penetration is 17-20%. If you increase the number of models, that's why I'm saying it is, we have to match because when we'll always keep on talking about the penetration, when we have 1 or 2 models in the country against 140, 150 models in the ICE world. So it is when we see whether this model is going to work or not, we need to see penetration in the segments in which it has been. And it is 70 to 20%. The demand is more. I'm talking still about supplies, right? And therefore, there's a huge opportunity. I just wanted to add that data point.
But then let me clarify, when I talk about penetration, and I talk about penetration of luxury products in the market itself, our
No, Martin, it was not for you. It was,
yeah, no,
it was an interesting data point for the audience.
Okay, so I wasn't sure.
You are absolutely right. In the luxury segment, there's an issue. I absolutely agree with you.
I think what Martin has been saying, and we have discussed this in the past as well, that taxation itself in the automotive industry, where we start off at 28%, which is the highest GST bracket, even for a two-wheeler, and it goes up to 50%. And let's not even talk about import duties, where we are sitting at 100% and 200% and God knows what. It needs to maybe relooked in the electric mobility era, because you need some incentives. You cannot be having 28% GST on everything. And also the relevance of the sub-4 meter classification. It was probably valid in the ICE era, because smaller cars means lighter vehicles, more cleaner. But in EV mobility, everything is clean. There's no emission. So what is the relevance of sub-4 meter? But that I think we need a separate discussion on that, and it's a very valid topic. We probably have that. But Shailesh mentioned about this supply side issue and the fact that maybe the suppliers are still a little circumspect when it comes to investing. So I would like to give the last word to ZF and Bosch. What is your sense? Do you think that most of the suppliers are still sitting on the fence, waiting for I don't know what, before they go whole hog and start investing, so that the OEMs are a little more spaced out when it comes to suppliers? What are you waiting for?
Okay, I was waiting for Guru Prasad to start, but then okay. I think it is a fact. We are looking at how the whole thing pans out, and I think what Shailesh mentions makes a lot of sense. We are seeing a big change year over year, and the CAGR is extremely motivating today to do the investment. So at ZF, we are really looking forward to supporting all the OEMs in their journey towards this. And I would also like to come back to the point which I mentioned before. The PLI is a great facilitator here. And that helps us to do more of industrialization. And I'm sure that, with more and more localization and industrialization, I think there is no choice for the suppliers but to invest, because if that's the future, there is no point in sitting on the fence and thinking that ICE will continue for long. I don't think it will be a very fast growth once a few more models gets launched. And I completely agree with what Shailesh says, that as we are competing 2 against 140, we are in this situation. The moment becomes 5 to 10 against 140, you will see that the percentage increase year over year will go up very fast. So at ZF, we are cautious, but then we are very positive, and we would like to go along with the customers in terms of doing the necessary investments and adding the resources, not only in terms of man and material, but also in terms of bringing in engineers to support the global requirements of software and engineering development.
Guru Prasad.
So just to add, I think I fully agree with what Shailesh said and what Suresh said in terms of all enablers being in place for growth. So there's no doubt about that. We also believe that this is the future globally and in India, and investments are in order to make that happen. The devil is always in the fine print, and that's where we need to get into to understand what are some of the hurdles that we need to resolve as an industry. See, typical line concepts which have been made. I'm now only focusing on the manufacturing aspect of it. The line concepts are made for high volumes and for multiplication of very high volume numbers, 100K e-axles per line multiplied over many lines. So are these the right concepts for India? Despite PLI, would that be the right approach, or should we be having a much better flexibility with regard to how we configure our lines to handle diversity of products that are likely to come over the next 4 or 5 years, and how do we want to handle that? These are some of the fine print things we need to deal with in the Indian context. And I'm only constraining myself to the next 4 or 5 years in terms of how this will evolve. But beyond that, when there is steady state, I think it's not a point of discussion at all. It's how well we do it, how efficiently we do it. And that's something we've done and proven that we, as an Indian industry, are capable of doing it. So there are some challenges, of course, in terms of how do we localize, especially for a global MNC which has done this in several geographies. How do we do it differently in India? Is that appropriate to be done differently? So those are some of the discussions that are ongoing now in terms of making this a success. Eventually, everybody in the value chain has to be commercially successful in this activity. On the engineering side, I already briefly talked about it. There is also quite a lot of challenge to make projects happen for the Indian market, and the kind of development capacities we can put in to get the people going. Sailesh talked about the car of the future being sort of a thing, software on wheels. I mean, it's absolutely true. And the amount of capable software engineers we need, the amount of power electronics engineers we need to make all these happen is huge. And we have to bring them up to speed on a very, very short basis, because a lot of the engineers today are working on global projects. And we also have to now, we have been doing this already for 2 years to invest and develop talent to specifically work on Indian projects, Indian variants, cost optimizations, line optimizations for India. So this is something that's going on, and we are fully committed to make this happen in India as well.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. We have actually run out of time, but this discussion was very, very comprehensive, very intense, and I really liked it. A little bit of sparring as well, which is always welcome. And it sets us up very well for the EV Conclave this year. We did receive a few questions on social media, but we are running out of time. We will not be able to take them. But still, thank you so much. And for the next, like Guru Prasad mentioned, for the next 3-4 years, probably we will keep talking about the challenges. But after that, it will become mainstay, and we'll probably have to find a different topic on what to talk on e-mobility. Till that time, we will wait for it to become mainstay, and we will do our bit. Thank you for joining us here at EV Conclave at ET Auto 2022.
Thank you, everyone, for such a detailed and informative discussion. Now let's see what's there in the next session. Stay tuned, everyone, and keep tweeting using the hashtag ET Auto EVC.